Hey everyone, it's Sherry with Squatchable. Today's report is about a farmer who's been having a troublemaker cause a little bit of mischief on his property for the past 2 years, and it turns out it's most likely a Bigfoot. He got a look at it. The report we're talking about today is report number 29305 with the BFRO. It's a Class A sighting. This sighting occurred near Blackstone in Brunswick County, Virginia. So there's not many reports for this area, but the reports that there are very relevant to this story, so I'm going to save those for later so we can go over those too. This happened in May, so it's springtime, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. The location that this happened at is an area of the gentleman's backyard where he's got woods that are alongside a soybean field. The witness and his son were outside armed with a pistol and a shotgun. They were checking for what had made a heavy thud sound at the back of their house. They thought it might be a burglar or a bear, especially since something had been causing trouble around their property for the past 2 years. And this is what the witness said in his report. I saw a deer run as if it was being chased. Then I saw a huge figure coming out of the woods. This thing was at least 8 feet tall. I screamed out to this thing to stop. It came toward us running. I told my son to shoot. He shot in its direction. Then it ran to my left flank and continued to come toward us. We ran back towards the house. I was in terror because the thing was shaped like a man, but it was covered with hair. I stopped and watched it walk away into the light, and it was huge, and there was an odor that really stunk in the air. It stayed in sight for about 5 minutes before it went into the woods. In the follow-up report, the researcher that goes by the initials DK confirmed the event with the son. He said it was too dark to see well, but he could clearly hear loud, heavy running footsteps coming towards them. The witness also said it made a huffing noise and a shriek sound when his son shot his gun. And in the follow-up report, DK got a little bit more details from the actual witness about what happened. DK noted, "It drew rapidly closer and stopped just 15 feet short of where the witness stood. In the seconds before the witness turned and ran back into his house, he saw a massive creature 4 feet wide that dropped from 2 legs to a 3-point crouch, placing one hand on the ground. And while it was too dark to make out the details of the face, he felt he could see well enough to discern a surprised look on the animal's face when it looked at him, panting heavily." At this point, the witness and his son ran back to their house where his wife was, and she told DK, the researcher, his face was blanched white with a look of terror, and for some time he was unable to verbalize clearly. When he had calmed down enough to tell her what he'd seen, he could only describe it as a big hairy demon. When the witness investigated the area the next day, there were 18 to 20-inch long footprints in the field. He also found long brown and gray hair in the woods behind his home. Now, the thing is, this isn't the first time strange things have happened at his property. There had been several occurrences of what we would call possible Bigfoot activity that he had been attributing to people messing around on his property. Something had been pounding on the walls of his home and throwing rocks at his family and onto his roof on many occasions. Heavy things, like a riding lawnmower or a trailer, had been moved overnight. There had also been loud howls coming out of the forest at night several times. There was also a young daughter who had claimed to see a hairy man outside a window, but the witness didn't believe her at the time. This was prior to him having this actual visual encounter where he saw this creature just 15 feet away from him. Also, the witness may have seen this creature before, but he had attributed what he was seeing to living near Fort Pickett, an Army National Guard maneuver training center. On one evening, he saw what he thought was a very large Marine wearing a backpack and a ghillie suit walking along the road in front of his house. The second time, about a year later, when he saw the figure again, he called out to the figure and it began walking fast until it turned into the woods along the road and disappeared. Speaking of Fort Pickett, what makes this story even more interesting is that there were 2 reports coming out of Fort Pickett by soldiers who were training there. They both occurred during the course of the same day, and this was about 2 weeks prior to this witness's encounter. It's easy to write it off as a copycat report where, sometimes somebody has something really amazing happen at one place and everybody jumps on and says, oh yeah, I saw this. That doesn't sound like the case here because the witness did his report very shortly after his encounter. This isn't one of those cases, though. The witness did his report very shortly after the encounter. The soldiers actually did their reports a year later. On top of that, the same researcher followed up with the two soldiers and their stories corroborated each other. The most interesting nugget from their reports? Both heard a radio report of a Bigfoot being sighted on another range in the facility. Now, following up on the witness's report, the researcher DK also spent the night camping on the witness's farm in the area that the sighting occurred, and he captured what may be Bigfoot howls. I've listened to several nocturnal bird calls for the area, and I can't find a match, but I'm not from that area, so I totally could be missing one. Also, at one point during the howl, it almost sounds like there may be some distant coyote feedback, so this possibly could be an individual with a really unique call. But here's the audio so you can decide for yourself. Now, for me, I live around a lot of coyotes. I hear them quite frequently, and I haven't heard a coyote sound like that. So I don't feel that it's coyote personally, but then again, though, like I said, there could be a really unique individual there. And about halfway through, like I said, you can hear a little bit of what sounds like maybe other noises that are rather similar, maybe some additional feedback. So I can't 100% write off coyote, but I personally haven't heard one sound like that. Also, the researcher put a long-duration audio recorder in the witness's bamboo grove, and on the fourth night, there were bipedal footsteps captured coming from the direction of Fort Pickett. And here's the sound of those footsteps. You'll notice that there's a lot of bullfrogs making a bunch of noise, and it's a little bit of a noisy sounding audio clip. But here, take a listen. It sounds like towards the end of the clip that those footsteps turn from more of a walking to a slightly faster pace, maybe not necessarily a run, but more of a jog sound. And according to the report, it was recorded around 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's not like it's a normal hour to have people out there traipsing around, especially on someone else's property in the middle of the night. As for the witness's feelings about the creature, in hindsight, he feels that it was wrong to fire a weapon around the creature. If it had wanted to cause actual harm to him or his family, it could have, but yet it hasn't. It's had plenty of opportunities. It also appears that his feelings are in line with others in the community. He told the researcher about a neighbor who has had several sightings of the creature over 25 years. In this report, there is mention of soybeans, bamboo, and of course the deer it was chasing. So, do you think that the food resources alone are what attracted this Bigfoot to this particular property and why it's messing around with this property owner? Or do you think it was curious about the family as well? I mean, it's throwing rocks at the house and at the family. I mean, if it wanted to, it could probably hit them, but it's just kind of tossing it around them. especially as well when you consider that the young daughter saw a hairy man out the window. I'm kind of thinking that maybe it's got food, it's got curiosity about these hairless people walking around there, so maybe it's interested in both, and it just happens to be a nice little habitat for it. And also, what do you think about how the witness described the creature's reaction to the shot being fired? I mean, it dropped down to a 3-point crouch, kind of like what you see football players doing, is what I imagine that he's describing. And it had a surprised look on its face. Considering the area this creature is in, with a military base that has munitions being discharged, I think it should be rather desensitized to the sound of a shot being fired. I don't know though, maybe it's not used to being this close to when a gun is actually being fired, or maybe it understands what it means when a gun is being fired in its direction and it was like, oh my gosh. I'm not sure about that, but it sounds like it knows to get down and, you know, watch out when you start hearing those getting fired. And what are your thoughts about the supporting reports coming from the soldiers that were training at Fort Pickett? I think it helps solidify the original witnesses' report, especially when you consider that these soldiers wrote about their experience well after the original witness wrote his. I'm really hoping that someday we can hear from the person who actually saw the Bigfoot on the range out there and put out the call on the radio. That would be awesome. Also, what do you think about how this creature is known, yet doesn't seem to be a big deal to the locals? I mean, if you had a large creature like this hanging around, would you be able to think of it as just any other wild animal out there? It seems like the kind of reaction that the people are having to this creature here is similar to what we've heard from some of the reservations. I believe in particular it's the White River Reservation, where they know it's there and they're fine with it. I think that's pretty awesome if that's how they feel in this area, although I would love to hear more stories out of this area. So let us know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see you there. Take care.